Welcome to the Mindful Momentum podcast. I am Robin Todd, your host, owner of Mindful Momentum, and thanks for being here today. I'm super excited, as always, to interview another amazing person in my world, Robin Henderson. Welcome, Robin, to our podcast, and just excited to talk about the wisdom that you've gained along your journey of experiences, but really diving into certainly how mindfulness has complemented your leadership development, and then moving into lots of different things that we're going to talk about. So let me tell you a little bit about Robin. She has spent over 30 years in public education, serving as a teacher, principal, university professor, and leader in educational nonprofits. She is currently the Chief Program Officer at School Smart KC, and was a founder and executive director of the Memphis Teacher Residency. She's an avid traveler, marathon runner. She is also an author and audio cast contributor, encouraging others to reflect, write, and strive to be their best. You can see why I love spending time with her.
Thanks for having me today, Robin. It's always fun to spend time with you.
It is. I love it. So let's just start out. I'd love for you to share with our listeners and viewers just a little bit about your passion about mindfulness and how you got here. So go ahead.
So I am a teacher at heart, always will be, and so have always been curious about what makes people tick and how to help people be their best selves. And over time, that turned into me pursuing a master's degree in counseling. So I've always been a pretty reflective person myself. And about 6 years ago now, I learned more about mindfulness while working as a director in a large school district, and knew that this was like the missing tool and missing piece for me because it just became such an easy practice to begin to incorporate to allow me to be more present for the people I was leading, but also to be more intentional just about life overall. And so got trained and certified as a Live Mindful trainer, and just have continued the journey from there.
I love that. And you're very passionate about leadership development, and you've had a lot of, obviously, leadership roles. So share a little bit about kind of your, the process of how you got here and why you're so passionate about promoting leadership development.
Yeah, so in one of my previous roles, had the privilege of supporting hundreds of teachers. And what I found over time is that the teachers never left positions because of the students. They never left because of the work. It really was usually connected to the leadership. And you've heard that phrase before, right? People don't leave jobs, they leave leaders.
And that's across all industries.
Right. It doesn't matter the industry. And I've even seen that in my own professional life, where I chose to leave a role that I was really excited when I started, but I worked for a leader who was pretty mindless. And
I think we all can relate to that at some point in our life.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so it just intensified my passion for helping leaders be more intentional. And we're all leaders, whether it be in our families, in our civic roles, in our households of faith. Like, we lead in so many different ways. And when we aren't intentional and mindful about that, we really run the risk of damaging relationships. Mm-hmm. So it has just become a passion of mine to help leaders be more aware, be more intentional, and, as I like to say, be more engaged.
Yes, of course. I love that you really highlight how we are all leaders in different capacities. Mm-hmm. As I think that's so true. And as a former classroom teacher, I don't think teachers necessarily see themselves as a leader or just a person in a normal job just kind of doing their thing, and yet we all are influencing the people around us in various ways, and we can do that in a positive way or a not so positive way. And I just love that approach because I think it empowers all of us to invest in our own self to be better, so that we can, in whatever way, model for others, what that what that looks like.
Yeah, there's a Brene Brown quote that I won't get it right in this moment, but I often use it, that she really frames leadership as anyone who sees the potential and wants to take kind of ownership for the potential of people and the performance of progress and systems and organizations. So it's like, oh, if you're the person that's thinking about a more intentional way to, organize your household, that makes you a leader, right? And so it does transcend all spaces. It's not about an org chart. It really is about the opportunity to see potential in people and processes, and take responsibility for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And who doesn't love Brene Brown, right? She's the best. So, let's talk a little bit about mental health and kind of where we are in terms of your perspective. You've been in various organizations, leading lots of different people in different levels. How is mental health impacting employees as you see it? And then let's shift then into a little bit of the resistance from organizations. But let's just talk a little bit about your perspective on mental health in the workplace.
I think it is a great shift that's happening, right? We're talking about how this impacts people, and I think it's one of the upsides of all of us having that shared experience of living through a global pandemic. It raised and elevated awareness in spaces where I don't think there had otherwise been. Having worked in education, there's always been conversation around mental health. Typically in the past, though, around student mental health. I think now the conversation is shifting to an awareness that the adult's mental health matters as well. And when I was getting certified, we often had conversations about how I wished I had had those tools in my tool belt around those micro practices that we talk about in our mindfulness training, to really empower and support my adults, because when they were their best selves, they were their best selves for the children and could support them. And I think that's true for us as leaders in our organizations. And so I think having an awareness that people don't leave their challenges and struggles, we'd like to think they leave them outside the door, but they don't. We're not able to, not in our humanity. We are whole people. And so all of that comes with us. And when ignored, can show up in unhealthy ways in workspaces. But when people have the opportunity to kind of deal with those things and not have to compartmentalize them, I think we end up with healthier workspaces. So I'm grateful that the conversation is shifting and we're starting to look at our employees and people as exactly what they are, as whole people and individuals.
Yeah. Well, and I noticed that as well. I am finding that the conversation, many organizations have kind of slipped back to autopilot of global pandemic. It was so top of mind, and yet the mental health state of employees and of people in general, while it may not be the same as it was during the pandemic, it's certainly still there. Right? Stress is high, anxiety is high, depression is high, feeling of overwhelm is high, and so it's interesting. And I think that the organizations want to pride themselves on addressing mental health, but that kind of getting over that hump of actually saying it and actually doing it is challenging. And I'm curious to know, what do you see as kind of the resistance of that? And certainly not any particular pointing the finger at anyone in particular, because it's multidimensional, right. And I know budgets aren't always robust for that kind of thing. But what resistance do you see in the trenches of the organizations you've been working with that would hold organizations back from investing in employee mental health?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is there's so many things that are competing for all of our, not only our dollars, but also our human resources. And I think so often people, organizations think it's a great idea. And we'll get to that right after we get past this crisis or right after we address this issue. So I don't think it's even that they don't care or don't realize a need for it, but don't quite fully understand that if you prioritize that, the rest of it will actually begin to take care of itself. And so I think it's getting people to fully understand what we know, that mental health, until you are in a good and secure and healthy place emotionally, you won't be your best self in your work role. And so I think that's part of the resistance is it's not that it's not important, but we've got this other thing that we need to prioritize, this budget crisis we need to get through, this fiscal need we have to address. And then once we deal with that, we'll come back to mental health.
It's always a later, but then that ends up just always being something that's never really embraced because there's always something.
Yes.
For all of our lives, you know, I think that's indicative of personal growth.
Yes.
You know, I'll do that, you know, when I have more time. I'll do that when, you know, such and such slows down, and it just never happens if you're not intentional.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people still very much believe that we should just compartmentalize things, right? The things that affect me outside of work have no place coming into work. So check it all at the door, right? And just show up, put your head down, do your work, and focus. And I think we have to realize that our times have evolved. People continue to evolve. There's so much more that people even have access to be distractions during the workday that they didn't once upon a time, right? I remember, not to date myself, but, you know, there was no cell phone that I could text my mom during the middle of a school day if I was having a crisis as a child, right? And now you do have parents where life intersects work all the time. Right? There's a child who is stressed or anxious at school, who is accessing and texting parents and sharing those stressors, which then, right, impacts that parent, that employee. And so I think because of that, I think we as leaders and organizations have to begin to think differently about how we support our employees and their mental health, starting with the leadership.
Well, and I was going to say, one, yes, life has gotten just very complex.
Yes.
Hasn't it? And, you know, some days I'm like, oh, if we could just go back. I recently did a lunch and learn on like a digital detox, and it was so fun. I sat with my husband and we were just talking about, oh my gosh, what was life like 30 years ago in the workplace and in our homes, and talking about having no GPS and what would you do if you needed to send out a message. Anyway, it was comical when you really start thinking how life has changed, and with it, there's upsides, there's downsides, which is what we talked about in the Lunch and Learn, of course. But it was fun reflecting because you're right, it's gotten very complex. And I think, you know, what you just said segues us beautifully into the next topic, because I believe, and what we know from research, is that it has to be top down. And I find the organizations that are embracing mindful and resilience and mental health are learning it themselves as CEOs, as COOs, as CFOs, that if we can get the C-suite to recognize it and embody it, they naturally go, oh my gosh, I want this. It's not just here, it's like they have experienced it. And that goes for all of us, right? Whether we're a teacher or a therapist. You know, when I teach, you know, counselors, social workers, it's like they want this to give to the client they're serving, but they can't quite get past this part and experience it. But it becomes so much more not only authentic, but then you're modeling it, and then that's just really where that empowerment and inspiration comes, I think. So, and I find there is some resistance with the C-suite folks. No offense if that's you, but it's a yes. Let's maybe do this for our people, but you know.
Yeah, one of the greatest gifts I've seen a CEO give to his team is sitting through a series of the trainings that I provide for leaders. And so the CEO was in the room and the chief of human resources was in the room alongside about 40 other directors and lead managers and the leadership of this organization. And the CEO wasn't just an attendee, was also a participant, an active participant, having the table conversations, lifting voice into the room alongside. And what I think that has empowered everyone else to then go out and lead their teams with more intentionality, because it's recognized that this is a value. And it's not just a value we put on paper. It's not just a value that we
Lip
said,
service.
right? And so this CEO committed, 6 90-minute sessions out of his time to participate with the group. And I think that just speaks to now we continue to move this forward. And they've built systems on how do they keep this momentum going in their organization. And that is where it begins. And so I'm always excited to hear the stories back from that group about the impact that it's having on their employees and, long-term on just the overall culture of the organization. But it starts with the leadership.
It does. Well, and it bridges that gap between the us and them, right? And, all good leaders don't necessarily want that, but they don't necessarily do things to make that. See, we're all in this together. Right. We're at one team, working toward that vision or goal, which really led us with your background and your passion for mindfulness and all of that to the development of the engaged leader, which I'm so excited about. Before you came along, I saw this need for leadership development and prayed a lot about somebody coming into our ecosystem that had a passion for that. And of course, God brought us you and was so grateful for that because, we all have different strengths. Right. And it's not necessarily mine, but I saw that as a need and a beautiful complement to leadership development and mindfulness and resilience and the need for it. So that kind of led us to your development. So tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about the engaged leader and the components of it and how you've kind of landed on what you've created, which is genius.
Yeah. So it really was born out of an authentic experience of going through the mindfulness certification while being a leader. And so it heightened my awareness. I mentioned I'm a naturally reflective person. I always am thinking about and processing, experiences and challenges and trying to continue to better myself. And I can remember having just finished a session with you, walked out of my office and noticed my administrative assistant eating lunch at her desk. And I was like, that was new to me. And I was curious about it because I thought, why is she eating lunch at her desk? And so the next time we met and had our check-in, I said, I noticed you were eating lunch at your desk the other day. And that you don't usually do that. Is everything okay? And she said, well, yeah. She said, you always eat lunch at your desk and you seem to get so much done and seem so productive. So I thought I would try it. And I thought, oh my God, that is the exact opposite of what I want happening on my team because it's not a great practice to have, right? And we know that multitasking actually isn't a real thing. And so my eating while working was not actually a healthy practice. But it just was the huge light bulb moment of that what I do as a leader, even without my words, influence those around me. And so out of that was this idea of how can we as leaders be our best selves so that we can lead first ourselves, then lead those around us and the overall work that we're responsible for. So the engaged leader was born out of that moment of my own aha, that my mindlessness really does have an impact on those around me, whether I think it does or not. And so how could I create something to share in small bites with leaders who are very busy, that can help them think intentionally about how they first lead themselves, which is our first pillar of the engaged leader level 1, which is around self-management, right? It's that idea of putting your oxygen mask on first as a leader. We all, if we've ever flown, we've heard that speech, and it's really true. But then moving beyond ourselves to become more aware of how you're eating lunch at your desk can begin to create practices in your team that aren't actually what you want for them. It's not the culture you want. And really helping leaders understand that your team has a culture. The question always is it the one you want? And if we're not intentional about that, so really building together a series of trainings that helps leaders to think about that and to have some tools in their tool belt to course correct and to understand it and to see it through their own leadership challenges. And kind of the final pillar of the first level is around intentional development. So how are we mindfully leading our organizations so we don't become like some organizations? One that I reference in the training is I ask people, and I date myself by saying, remember going to pick up movies at Blockbuster on Friday nights?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
I love that. And I kind of miss that.
Right. And now we can just click a button and stream all the movies we want to in our homes. And so that if we are not intentional as leaders, we miss those shifts that are subtly happening in our industry, in our teams. And so we miss great opportunities by not being fully engaged and fully present along the journey. So that's kind of where it was born from and our first level. And after some great opportunities to share this with some organizations, realized that there was kind of a need for a second level. So we've developed a second level that really helps us as leaders think about how do we help our employees and organizations thrive considering all the diversity that exists in our world. So it's not a DE&I training, but it is one that I think helps leaders to think about and honor the diversity that is so vast on a single team, and what are lessons and takeaways, and how can mindfulness enhance how you as a leader lead in such a diverse space.
And you know, as you say all this, and of course I'm passionate about mindfulness, but it really is the foundation. Because when you think about, you know, awareness and self-understanding,
Right.
and then giving yourself those micro moments throughout the day to actually practice being mindful, and I mean, that's why it's such a beautiful approach. One of the things, as you were talking earlier about multitasking, I think this is one of the hardest things for me to convey to people is that, and I get it because I used to be there, but it's like I've got so much to do. I can't stop.
Right.
I got to push through. And I mean, I've got so much to do and so little time. And many people are operating that way that it feels so counterintuitive to actually pause throughout your day, to just give yourself the, you know, grace of 30 seconds or 60 seconds or a micro moment. I'm guessing you were probably operated that way too.
Oh, absolutely.
Previously.
Absolutely. I mean, I was, you know, responding to text messages while also emailing, while also half listening to a person talk, although I swore I was giving them my full attention.
Of course.
While also eating a lunch,
Yes.
right? And all these things are happening, and none of it's happening at its highest level that I'm capable of. Right. And it's, you know, the moment when you read someone's reply to an email and you happen to glance down at your email that you sent while multitasking and realize you left words out or you misspelled words. And, you know, thanks to Grammarly, we don't get caught up in that as much anymore. Right. But yeah, I mean, all the time. And I just had this conversation with someone this morning. I told him, I said, one of my, you know, cheat tricks that I use, because I always tell people the real goal is to have your mind be where your feet are.
Nice.
And when I find myself during the course of a workday kind of shifting, you know, whether it be because I'm listening to a conversation out in the hallway or whatever it is, that I literally physically adjust my body and I put my feet flat on the floor. So I uncross legs or, pull them in or take them off the chair that, might have been resting them on the bottom leg of a chair. And I literally put my feet on the floor and allow myself to feel where they are and invite my mind to come back into the space. And it seems like a small thing, but it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. I love that. In fact, I was going to ask you what kind of your favorite go-to was right now.
Yeah, so that is one. I am and now working in an office space that's a pretty open workspace, which has been a shift and a change. And so I find myself getting distracted and drifting off into others' conversations. And so when I do that, it's the plant your feet. And so your feet and mind are in the same location.
Nice. Well, it's just a grounding, right? Grounds us to kind of this moment.
Yes.
Because it's so easy to live here and live here, right? We all know that that's our challenge.
Yeah.
So I love it. I'm going to have to try that. I mean, I do that when we, do simple meditations, but I'm gonna try that on my own. Well, one of the things that kind of made me think of leaders is the challenges that they face. And what I see, I'm sure you see too, in how they view their role. Well, first of all, many people are promoted to a leadership role because they're really good at their job.
Right.
And it's like those are two very different skill sets.
Yes.
Right? And so naturally that would be difficult if an organization wasn't really giving them those skills to lead effectively. But let's talk a little bit about, what you see is important in leaders to be able to grow.
Yeah, I think it's that opportunity, and this is a hard one, right? Especially if you're a leader, but it's being vulnerable, right? It's being willing to say, I don't know. I'm not certain. And that's just not been the norm in our culture, right? That is, if you're in charge, you're supposed to have all the answers. And being able to kind of lead from a position of, I can learn from the people that I work alongside. I used to always tell folks that I had the privilege to have on my team that my role was to find really smart people who really knew what they were doing. And then all I did as a leader was just move obstacles out of their way, right? Move the roadblocks so they could shine and do their best work. But that meant that I would have to acknowledge that they knew more than I did. And I got to really practice that. I had the gift of having an amazing pre-K teacher in my building. And in all the years that I taught, I actually never wanted to teach anyone under third grade. So I was not an expert in early childhood, and this person was. And so I had to be, as a leader, willing to be a learner. And to be vulnerable. And a lot of times we move into leadership positions where our team is more experienced than we are, whether that be in the actual body of work or if it be within the organization. And so I think leaders have to be willing to be vulnerable and say when they don't know or they need support or that their team has things to teach them. I think that's one. And I think going along with that vulnerability is around authenticity. I tell people in the training, it's the idea that you're the same person when the CEO is in the building as you are when the custodian's around or the interns are around. And that if you're not, then that sends a message to your team, and it does begin to erode that trust and that confidence, but it also communicates a message that you don't value them as much. Children taught me that. And when I was a principal.
Aren't they great teachers?
They are the best.
Out of the mouth of babes,
because they have no filters.
Yeah.
They have no filters. And as a principal, I went in once to observe a teacher, and, it wasn't going quite well. And she asked a question, and students were raising hands. And I noticed that she kept avoiding this one student who continually kept their hand up. And finally, there were no other hands, and she had to acknowledge the student. And the student asked her, "Why are you acting different with her in the room?" And the her was me as the principal.
Yes.
And at that moment, I just kind of packed up my notebook and I graciously left because you could see
she was horrified.
She was mortified, but that's the truth. She was being different because I was in the room and the students knew that. And so I think as leaders, when we can give ourselves permission, and mindfulness does help with this, right? That we can be mindful when we're not being authentic. and we can catch it and correct it. We can be mindful when we're putting up barriers instead of being vulnerable, and it helps us to then make those in the moment changes so that we are building bridges with people and strengthening our relationships with them.
Well, it's the growth mindset.
Yes.
As leaders.
Yes.
I mean, we've talked about this for many years in helping kids have this growth mindset, and yet as adults we don't embrace that.
Right.
Which is that mistakes are good. Yes. That's where we grow. We have, I mean, all that we teach kids
applies. It absolutely still applies to us as their parents, their guardians, their aunts, their uncles, their whatever role you play. It's still the same for all of us.
Yeah, and we are all a work in progress.
Oh my goodness, yes. And I always tell people, when we wrap the trainings for the engaged leader, the last thing we always do is we share a micro practice with them, a mindful micro practice, something they can take with them into their day, and they're encouraged to practice it between our times together. And then when we get together, some people have, some people haven't, and I just remind them that this isn't about perfection. There's not a destination in life or leadership. It is all a journey, and we're all journeying through it together. And some days the journey is smooth sailing, and other days it's bumpy, and it's okay. And I remind people, and I'm not the first person to say it, I picked it up somewhere, right? Give yourself grace the way you would someone who you love deeply, which is, so we should, right? And we just give ourselves grace along the journey.
I love that. I just, it's such a gift, isn't it? And I'm so grateful that I, was led into this work and get to walk that with other people.
Yeah.
Because what we experience that's so positive and so encouraging for our own personal growth and sense of well-being is what we want for other people.
Right.
So I love that you're out in the world and sharing this and spreading it. Of course, love that we get to collaborate and that Mindful Momentum has you as a part of our offerings. As we kind of wrap up our conversation today, what would you say if there's a leader listening, watching, that recognizes the importance of this and they're on the fence as to how to make it happen, whether it's within their organization or how to kind of take that next step? What would you recommend?
Yeah, so I would first recommend, if they're thinking it, that means they need to do it. Because there's something, right? There's some data that is coming to them, whether it be as they watch their employees, as they look at their employee retention or lack thereof. Like, there's something stirring in them. There's a why that they think this is a need. So I tell them, just act on it. And there's several different ways that they can, right? We've had organizations that we partner with. We come in, we provide the training to their leaders. They can use our resources. We have that as one entry point. But now we're looking to offer new trainings that if they're just curious and they wanted to go through the training themselves, they could sign up. They can visit the mindful-momentum.com website and check it out and sign up. It's a lunch and learn format to come and experience it for themselves, so that then they can think about how this would fit and impact their organization. But I would say if they're on the fence, that means it's time to get off the fence and do something, because there's something happening within their organization that's making them think they need to be more intentional about this.
Or even about their own, where they are personally. I'm always like, if you're just not feeling like you're at your best, invest in yourself, and that might be a great place also then to take that next step, to start talking and having conversations with different departments to see about how do we, prioritize this a little bit. And sometimes we have to start small.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Sometimes less is more. And I think the best thing we can do, again, is we start with ourselves and let that ripple out. So, yes, we're so excited about offering individual training to people within organizations or any place to learn and kind of get a sample to see. One of the things that I love about Robin's training is that it's a nice hybrid approach to leadership development in the sense of the first portion is trained via live, could be online or in person.
Right.
And then those people then become facilitators of the recorded training. And that really allows for lots of different levels of managers and leaders within organizations in a very turnkey, sustainable, cost-effective way. We're not out to make millions. We just want to help people.
Yeah, and it's been great to watch one of our partner clients use this in that exact way. They brought me in to do the live training, 3 sessions with all the leaders, CEO included, and then the person in their HR department who's in charge of all of the employee onboarding and trainings now uses the video series to, when they bring on new leaders, to take all the new leaders through that. And so it was really cool when I went back to then do the second level to see faces in the room that I didn't recognize, but that they recognized me because they had been trained using the videos. And so it's a great way for organizations to make it fit for them and customize it. And we also provide a facilitator's guide with recommendations for using the videos effectively. So it's a great way for organizations to think about, gosh, we don't always have time to pull people together in person. We want to offer the training live virtually and then have a catalog of resources to continue to use in the organization.
And this is really how we create cultural shifts.
Right.
Right. And this isn't a quick fix. We're playing the long game here.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's so beautiful in how it was designed to be that, just to be able to keep going because and we didn't even talk about retention today, but that certainly is a topic of conversation in many of the organizations that I speak with and work with, but starting in that onboarding process of equipping them early on so that they don't end up leaving because they're frustrated and not feeling supported.
And talk about a great way to bring a new leader into your organization by communicating to them. The first sessions are about self and self-management. And wow, I'm joining an organization that is actually encouraging me to start with myself. So, yeah, that sets a tone, I think a really important tone for someone new to your organization. And it speaks to the value that they are not just widgets in a system, but you see them as people and you're investing in them as people. So I always say,
who doesn't love that?
Oh, everyone does, right? That's the thing, right? We all know people want to know that they matter and that they are seen and that they are heard in this big, crazy world of ours. So, I can't imagine being a new employee, a new leader, and that's one of the first offerings you give me on my professional journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yay. Love it. Okay. So if you want to learn more about the Engaged Leader or anything about Mindful Momentum, as Robin mentioned, you can go to mindful-momentum.com. There's a little drop-down tab with some more information about the Engaged Leader. And Robin and the program. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Again, go to our website for more information. But we just appreciate you being here today. And we're here to inspire and empower your journey. So let's all continue to grow so that we can flourish together. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Robin.
All right. Take care.